Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. I apologize for my tardiness. I was having some technical issues. Anytime you do something online, you can expect those. But today I have a very special guest. I have Mr. Brian Harrison, who is Chief of Staff for Health and Human Services um, Cabinet Member Alex Azar. And he is now running for Texas 10th Congressional District. Uh, Definitely to represent you. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate Mr. Harrison you coming on and coming on to talk to the people of Ellis County. How are you today?
I'm great, DV, and it's kind of you to thank me for coming on. But really, we should be thanking you with a special election this short, perhaps the shortest in Texas history. It's really important for you and others to give candidates a chance to get their message out, but even more importantly, to let the voters hear the candidates directly, because there's not a lot of opportunities for debates and forums when we have this short of an election.
Yeah, it is a very short election. So I've managed to get the other candidates on for Texas 10, and I'm rounding out the shows with you. Go ahead and tell the people, as you know, and I've said it before, the census has said we have grown, we have changed, and I'd like for you to talk to the people of Ellis County and just tell them a little bit about your background. Where were you born and that kind of stuff.
You bet. And yes, it absolutely has changed. I mean, I've considered this area home for a long time. It's where I went to junior high. It's where I went to high school. And my goodness, the Ellis County of the early and mid '90s that I knew. I mean, it's the change. It's hard to overstate how much change we've seen since those days. So, yeah, for folks who don't know me, I went to junior high, high school here in Ellis County before going down to Texas A&M. Proud member of the Fighting Texas Aggie class of 2004. I studied economics and then jumped into public service just right out of college. I went to the Bush White House, worked for President Bush as a young man, held a few different positions there, helping him try to strengthen and modernize and protect Social Security, among many other things. And then when that administration ended, I went over to the Pentagon, continued serving the country, did some defense intelligence work for a little while. And I understand, DV, that you actually were in the service. Am I right there?
Yes, I was in the Navy for 10 years, a veteran
Mm.
of Iraq, and yeah, I am a vet.
Well, then I would be remiss if I didn't thank you sincerely for your service. Thank you very much. I'm very proud to have served the country in the Pentagon, but I never wore a uniform like you. So thank you very much for your service.
That
Um,
Thank you for your support. I appreciate that.
no, you bet, you bet. So, anyways, so after those types of positions I had, I really wanted to get back to my roots and back to Texas. So my wife and I moved back home to Texas. We worked in multiple small family businesses here in Texas, here in Ellis County. And I live between Midlothian and Waxahachie. I think my wife was watching a little bit too much Fixer Upper several years ago. We bought a house that was built just about 8 years after the Civil War. It's almost 150 years old right now, and we've been fixing that up for years. And this is where we were living, where we were working, where we were raising our family. When I was asked about 3.5 years ago to go and join the Trump administration, and when duty calls, you stand up and accept it. And I did. I went and served as the chief of staff, as you mentioned, in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And for folks who may not be terribly familiar with it, HHS is the largest cabinet agency on earth. I had a staff of about 85,000 people, and our budget was in excess of 1.4 trillion with a T dollars. We oversaw the CDC, National Institutes for Health, Medicare, Medicaid, the Food and Drug Administration, among many others, as well as the COVID response. So was very instrumental in helping get Operation Warp Speed off the ground, and really proud of our response there that saved just countless lives. And we did a lot of other, things that I'm really proud of for the country during the Trump administration. I mean, we took border security incredibly seriously. We, especially when COVID hit, we used our public health authorities. It's the now famous Title 42 order that shut the border down coast to coast, both to illegal immigration and to COVID-19. We created the most secure border in the history of the country, and it's just been absolutely devastating to watch what Joe Biden has done with that. I mean, when he took office, all he had to do was nothing. He could have said, "Thank you, President Trump," and gone and taken a nap, and the border would not be the disaster that it is today. And unfortunately, he didn't do that.
Brian,
We protect.
I'm
Go
sorry
ahead.
to interrupt, but
No,
Brian,
no, go ahead.
we're gonna definitely cover all those subjects, but I want to kind of
Okay.
line it up and get you on fundamentals first, because
Oh, sure.
before we find out, this position or that position, the fundamentals
Yeah.
are important. And when I first met you, I asked you this
Mhm.
question, and I've
Yep.
been using it, and I've asked every single candidate,
Uh-oh.
what is the role of government
Ah,
in the lives of the people of Ellis County? What is the appropriate role?
yeah, I think the role of government is to do the minimum amount necessary to provide for law and order and for the protection of our God-given and inalienable rights. I think that's the role of government.
What can the people expect as far as how you see the Second Amendment fundamentally?
Yeah. Honestly, it's a simple answer. The there's not a lot of ambiguity in the wording of the Second Amendment, and it ends with "shall not be infringed." So the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That is plain as day. It's black and white. I'm not an attorney. We got too many attorneys running for office and in office, but you don't have to be a legal scholar to parse out what that means. And I will be an ardent defender of the Second Amendment. Very proud to have received the highest rating possible from the NRA. I support the Second Amendment. I support constitutional carry, and I don't want government restricting the ability of law-abiding Texans to keep and bear their arms.
So, one of the big things that have been happening lately in the country has been like cancel culture and speech being
Yeah.
limited. So, where does the First Amendment fall in your psyche? What are your thoughts on the First Amendment?
Yeah, we are. We're seeing a very odd and unholy alliance between big government and big tech. I mean, can you imagine a more unholy marriage of two of two things, where we are seeing censorship,
Watch out,
especially
buddy. They might cut us off. What?
right? Okay. Would it be? Here's the question: would it be your first time, DV?
No, no, yeah, they
Okay.
Facebook is pretty rough. So go ahead. I'm
Well,
sorry.
no, no, we're seeing that we can't have that in a society. We've got now. I mean, it's now been publicized. I mean, the White House working with these social media titans, to censor content, to determine, what is or is not fake news and false news. And I got to tell you, I am far more concerned with somebody who would assume the position of a censor, especially if they're in the government, of things that are or are not false news. I mean, we see examples of this all the time. So that they say is ridiculous, and then it proves out a year or so later to be correct. So yeah, the free speech has got to be protected. But we have, I mean, they are attacking so many of our fundamental rights right now. I mean, and that's one of the reasons I'm running. I mean, we have to have more people willing to stand up and say, no, this can't happen. We're seeing assaults on our free speech rights. We're seeing assaults on the Second Amendment rights. And we're seeing assaults on our private property rights. Look what they're trying to do with high speed rail here in the state of Texas. That's not what eminent domain means. So, yeah, I mean, we have a full on assault from people who, at their core, they may call themselves Democrats. They may even call themselves Republicans, especially in Texas. It's convenient to say you're a Republican. It's even convenient to say you're a conservative Republican. But we have far too many people who are willing to go along to get along and possibly or intentionally sacrifice our fundamental rights in the process.
So can the people expect from you to um, buck the trend if the trend isn't with the values that you espouse?
100%. I'm not running for office to win any popularity contests. Not
Well,
at all. I went to the swamp and worked with President Trump and Secretary Azar. The swamp knows me, and the swamp hates my guts. Okay. I mean, I enacted some of the biggest deregulatory efforts in the history of the federal government, found ways to sunset almost 20,000 federal regulations. I put term limits on career bureaucrats. People thought it couldn't be done. The New York Times absolutely savaged me for it. We have, unfortunately, as a party, and I'll talk intra Republican Party for the moment. I think for a long time, certain leadership elements in the Republican Party, the establishment of the party, has become far too concerned about power and the acquisition of power for its own sake. Then it has been about principles and standing steadfast with the principles of our founding and of the belief in individual liberty, limited government, private property rights, personal responsibility. Ronald Reagan used to talk with a glimmer in his eye about the United States being that bright and shining city on a hill. And I've got four kids, DV, 7, 5, 3, and 1. And I'll be honest, when I look into the future, what I project, if things continue the way they're going, I don't see my children growing up and living in that future. And I actually get emotional talking and thinking about that. And we need more people who share the types of values I was raised with right here in Ellis County. I took those values to DC, enacted conservative reforms, and came back home. I did that 2 times. I was asked to work for 2 presidents, and both times I came home to Ellis County. But we need more people willing to stand up and say, no, this assault on our freedoms and our liberty must stop, whether it makes us popular or unpopular. We've got to send more people to Austin and to Washington who are willing to do the right thing, no matter the consequences. And that's what I can commit to doing to the voters here in House District 10.
Well, Brian, I'm sure that the people of Ellis County love hearing that. I'm going to go ahead and transition to the issues. So we'll go
Great.
into, let's go into the Democrats are starting to come back for quorum. There's several bills that came up. One of the hottest bills on, as far as the news is concerned, is the voting integrity bill that has been put up. So what are your thoughts on that? And would you be a yes vote on that?
100%. It's one of the legislative, clearly articulated on the website, the Republican Party of Texas, as a legislative priority. I'm glad it's on the special session agenda. I quite frankly wish we had more of our legislative priorities on the special session agenda. But yeah, I would absolutely support that. We cannot ever, in Texas or in the United States, ever have the outcome of any election called into question. When you start having that and there's questions around legitimacy, that threatens to unravel the very fabric of our republic. So it is one of, if not the most important things that the Texas legislature needs to tackle. I do support the efforts to strengthen voter integrity, and I hope we pass this as fast as absolutely possible. And I can't even fathom how this could be a bipartisan issue. Who does not want election integrity? So yeah, we should pass it. I'm glad they're working on it.
One of the other issues facing Texas is the border. As you know, there was something like 200,000 people coming in, and how many got away.
Yep.
So I needed to know what are your thoughts on that, and how, as if you went down to Austin, if you're chosen by the people and you go down to Austin, what kind of things would you propose in the legislature?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I'm really, really passionate about, because I was so heavily involved with working in this on this issue in the Trump administration. I mean, everybody knows the Trump administration, and those of us there took border security with the utmost of seriousness. And especially when COVID hit, it was our department, the Department of Health and Human Services. We used our public health authority because we knew this was the worst time imaginable to have wide open borders and hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants carrying COVID-19 into the interior of the United States when we're trying to combat a pandemic. So we put in place the Title 42 order and created the most secure border in history. That's what Joe Biden inherited, the most secure border in history. He trashed it. He trashed every one of our successes. I was so incensed by this that after I left government, again, I was the chief of staff at HHS, I turned around using my friends, my personal resources, and sued the Biden administration, sued my old agency, HHS, sued the Secretary of Homeland Security, because we have to stand up and push back and secure our borders using every single tool available to us. I assure you, the Democrats never shy away from a lawsuit. They never shy away from any procedural or administrative tool or tactic in pursuit of their big government or open borders objectives. And it's about time we as Republicans stood up and did the same. And I think because the federal government, so again, I'm a small government guy. I don't like the federal government doing much, but this is one of the clearly enumerated responsibilities of the federal government. They're not going to take it seriously. They've demonstrated that. I think it's time for Texas to have to stand up and take border security, unfortunately, into our own hands.
So is it legal, or would you support housing illegals in Texas?
Now we have to
Texas facilities.
No, I know this issue intimately well, because at HHS, those facilities are actually where they belong. So I know this program very well, and I'm not convinced that most of these facilities in Texas are even being operated legally. And I think that's something we need to look at. I'm convinced that a vast majority of them, perhaps at least the vast majority of them, are possibly operating in violation of state law. We cannot do this. I'm sorry, if we're a nation without borders, then by definition, we are not a nation. We've got to secure our borders. We've got to stop this transporting of illegal immigrants all over the country. But the first thing we have to do is stop the bleeding, stop the southern border, and then we can work on an immigration policy that works for America and works for Texas.
So quick question. Do you support building that wall? Okay.
Yes.
So let's go into another issue that's affecting, and I know you're in a hard stop here soon, so I wanted to kind of go through these. COVID. COVID has reared its
Yeah.
ugly head again. Do you
Hmm.
support the mandates of any kind from the government for pertaining to being from Health and Human Services, someone who's
Yep.
worked on the vaccine and
Hmm.
operational warp speed? You've seen what this COVID does. So
Hmm.
would you support the state mandating masks or lockdowns or anything like that?
There will be no bigger opponent of COVID mandates in the state of Texas than Brian Harrison. Let me be unequivocal about this point. And yes, COVID is serious. It is undeniably a serious problem. But let me tell you what's more serious. That's the loss of liberty, the loss of freedom, and the abdication of personal responsibility under the theory that government can always keep us safe. I am a proponent of Operation Warp Speed. I'm incredibly proud of it. The vaccine program saved countless lives, and especially if you're in a vulnerable population, you should absolutely talk to your physician and consider getting vaccinated. But the point is, right now, we do not need these mandates. They're counterproductive. And especially if someone's goal is to get more people vaccinated, then the last thing they should be doing is mandating it or coercing it. I believe in freedom. Uh, Persuasion is always going to be better than coercion. And so I will introduce a bill in the state legislature the second I am sworn in after I win this election to ban all COVID mandates in the state of Texas. We don't need COVID mask mandates. We do not need COVID vaccine mandates. We do not need vaccine passports. And we need to make sure we no longer have any of these harmful shutdowns that absolutely wreaked havoc across our state and our nation.
Property taxes are a big issue.
Hmm.
There's been people taken out of their homes or losing their homes for property
Yep.
tax, which I think it's wholly un-American. What are your thoughts on property taxes? What would you do to alleviate that issue for the people of Ellis
Yeah,
County?
that's a great question and one of my big passion areas. It is unconscionable to me as a Texan living in a state that loves freedom and liberty that you right now, because of our property taxing system, no Texan can ever truly own their home. We cannot abide by a system where that is true because even if you're responsible and you pay off your mortgage, if every year you're still having to write a check for 5,000, 7,500, 10,000, $15,000 to Austin, then I'm sorry. You might say you own your home, but you don't. You are nothing more than a tenant, and the state is your landlord. We have got to move beyond this system. And people have been talking about reforming and modifying property taxes in Texas for decades now, and the problem has not gotten better. There's a constant gaming of the system, whether your rates go up or your valuation goes up. But we have got to allow true home ownership, and the only way I believe to do that is to take on a big and audacious goal, and that's to fundamentally abolish and replace the property tax system that we have here in Texas.
Okay, so get rid of it. And what would
Get
you
rid of it.
replace it with, real quick?
There's a lot of solutions that are being worked on right now that are far more equitable, far more broad based, far more fair, and that I believe Texans would support overwhelmingly as opposed to the current system we have right now.
There you have it, voters of Ellis County. He wants to abolish your property taxes.
I sure do.
So the next thing I wanted to kind of go into was schools. Schools
Mhm.
suffered during COVID. They really did, and special education more so than that. And they have mandates that are always have problems with funding. So as a state representative, can the boards in Ellis County, the school boards, count on you to listen to them for when they talk about, hey, they need money, and will you fight for the education system in Texas?
I care passionately about education. Two of my children go to Long Branch right here in Midlothian. And, I think we're privileged in Texas to have a lot of good public schools, but I'm also very proud to be endorsed by very active parents who are very concerned about the liberal indoctrination that's going on there. Respect Midlothian just endorsed me. I'm very proud of that. The American Federation for Children for School Choice endorsed me just today. In fact, the loudest voice probably in America for education for everybody, including school choice, former Trump Education Secretary Betsy DeVos just came out and endorsed me this afternoon. I was so proud and honored to receive that. We have got to make it back to the core and the basics in education: reading, writing, arithmetic, history, sciences, and stop with the indoctrination. I will do everything I can to get to core curriculum, but more importantly than that, I am going to favor education policy that empowers parents, that lets parents be in the driver's seat on where, when, and how their child gets educated, and not be in the pocket of the educational bureaucracy. Because at the end of the day, nobody has a bigger, I'm sorry, bigger incentive to make sure that a child is well educated than their parent. And I like to always go back to principles too. Just because we as a society have decided that government should pay for a good or a service, it does not necessarily follow that government should be the only provider of that good or that service. So I want dollars chasing the children so that the parents can be empowered to educate their children in a manner that they believe is best for them.
Respect Midlothian ladies have some real good information. I suggest you guys check it out. So veterans issues, the vets, you know, a lot of them came back with PTSD. Obviously, this thing with Afghanistan, I can be honest with you. Since Sunday, I came out of church and I saw our flag coming down on our embassy, and it just hurt. And I got a gut punch, and other vets that I've talked to have felt the same way. We all kind of agreed, you know, we needed to get out of Afghanistan, but how we did it was embarrassing. And it was reminiscent to what happened to, and I'm sorry to get into that, but anyway, it's reminiscent to what it's reminiscent to what my dad went through. So I'm embarrassed for the country that I spent 10 years defending. So I wanted to know, the veterans have issues, and you know they can always use a proponent in the state house. Will you be there? Will you be open to some things for veterans and helping them out, like maybe college tuition waivers or for disabled vets?
Yeah, my goodness, I have so many thoughts based on that, and I know you wore the uniform for a decade, and just again, thank you. You know, our nation owes an eternal debt for anybody who voluntarily puts on the uniform of this country. And because when you do that, you are explicitly saying, I'm willing to risk my life. I'm willing to lay my life down for the freedoms that our nation was built upon. And watching what happened in Afghanistan, we don't have to spend long on it, but those visual images coming out of Kabul, I got genuinely teared up watching that. It's a national disgrace. If Joe Biden had any shame, he would resign with his head held low. He doesn't have any shame. He won't do it. But it would be the only right thing to do. I agreed with President Trump and others that we had been there a long time and that we needed to start talking about coming home. We needed to bring the troops home. But I don't think if you tried, we could have done it in a more disastrous and humiliating fashion that not only emboldens our enemies, but lets our allies know we cannot be counted on. Yeah. So it's a disgrace. And for every family who sacrificed either directly or indirectly in that war over the past 2 decades, my heart goes out to them. And it's a disaster, absolute disaster.
Thank you.
And yes, to your other question about veterans, yeah, I would absolutely look at expansion of veterans benefits. We gotta take care of our veterans, both on education as well as on healthcare, and that's something I worked very closely with the deputy secretary and others of Veterans Affairs in the Trump administration, because I was at HHS and at VA. We got to make sure healthcare works for our veterans, and for the VA it does for some, but for others, hey, if they need help and healthcare somewhere else, they should be able to get that as well.
So in closing, I wanted to go ahead and ask you quick questions, as far as marijuana legalization, for, against, or what do you think?
Sure. So with any issue like that, I want, the more controversial an issue is, I want it to be decided at the most local level possible. And we have a problem with cannabis policy in the United States because under the Controlled Substances Act, it is illegal at the federal level. And so right now what we have is completely untenable and unsustainable patchwork of contradictory laws at local levels, at state levels, and then ultimately at the federal level. So I think the first thing we've got to do is get this out of being a federal issue. This should go back to being a state issue, a states' rights issue. Let the states decide what's best for them and their population in their state. We've got to do things that can enhance research. We now know that there are some therapeutic benefits here. The FDA has approved a drug, Epidiolex, for pediatric epilepsy, and my heart goes out to the children for decades before that didn't have access to certain therapeutic benefits. You talked about veterans and PTSD. I just wanted all of the above strategy when it comes to things that can help our citizens.
Thank you. In closing, I'd like for you to, this is the point in the show where you talk to the people of Ellis County, and you tell them why they should vote for Brian Harrison. The mic is yours.
Thank you, DV. Yeah, so to everybody out there in House District 10 in Ellis County and in Henderson County, I've been so honored to talk to hundreds of you in both counties ever since we got in this election. And to, quite frankly, many of you probably watching this tonight have known me for going on three decades or more. It'd be the honor of my life to represent you in Austin. And I can tell you, I'm running because, again, like I talked about my kids and my fear for their future, my fear that our liberties, which are under assault by Democrats and establishment Republicans alike, I am terrified that my children might not have a free state or a free country to grow up into. And I want to go to Austin to be the loudest and the strongest and most passionate voice for the principles that all Texans cherish: freedom, liberty, personal responsibility, private property rights, the right to worship your God, the right to own your own home. And, honestly, I think that if voters sit down and take a look at the candidates, there's one clear choice. Only one who doesn't just say they're a conservative Republican, but who has a long and powerful track record of taking on Democrats, taking on the liberal media, taking on the establishment Republicans, delivering conservative victories that will be enduring and impactful for the next generation. I'd be very honored to be their fighter for freedom and for liberty down in Austin.
Thank you so much again for coming on. I know you have to go. I appreciate it, and sorry about my little glitches at first. And thank you so much for coming on and talking to the people of Ellis County, sir.
It's always great to see you. Thank you so much for having me on. I look
Good.
forward to seeing you in person here real soon.
Take care.